Time and Tide, the Australian Watch Authority.
As I step off at the surface at Taurus Littrow, we'd like to dedicate the first step of Apollo 17 to all those who made it possible.
Welcome. It's great that I'm actually the one that can say welcome to my side of the world.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm in the Amiga Museum in Beale. And look, there are watches around that have been near the moon, that have circled the moon, that have spacewalked. I want one that's been on the moon.
I have a surprise for you.
Okay.
I thought that you might ask this.
Okay.
And
Fairly transparent, fairly ambitious guy.
What I'm giving you is the very watch that during Apollo 17 was worn on the wrist outside the spacesuit of none other than Gene Cernan.
That is intense. I'm starting to lose my questions as I'm holding this, because the first thing I notice is that this watch has many stories to tell through its cracks, through its scratches. This has seen some serious duty. What do you think might have caused some of these fractures to the watch?
Well, I have to say something as stupid as I wish I was a crack on a Hesselite crystal. What I can guess only is it's not the easiest thing to climb down a ladder.
Yes.
It's not the easiest thing to run around the moon, to be bumped around driving lunar rover. Even though it looks in slow-mo, it wasn't. And they did experiments on the moon. They planted the solar wind experiment, for example. They did all these things, and I can guarantee you that yes, a Speedmaster, any watch would have been bumped around like crazy on the moon.
I wonder, is the watch still functional? Did it survive?
It survived perfectly. It runs, and like proof that it runs is actually it's not. You know, you don't see it at its usual, 10:08 smiley position. It just stopped at the position it just had when its main barrel ran out. Because we run this watch quite frequently, we make sure that all these watches, all our watches actually, are maintained.
Yes.
I don't say restored, I say maintained. For many astronauts, their watches were something like a mascot. So some of these astronauts, they kept on requesting on their next mission the very same watch they wore, or they were issued actually by NASA on the very first mission. And Mr. Cernan,
like a superstition of sorts.
Almost like a superstition of sorts, exactly. As you would have the Snoopy as a mascot for safety after the Apollo 1 fire, you would have an astronaut requesting the very same lucky charm. And the watch was a lucky charm, if you want. So Mr. Cernan requested for his Apollo 17 mission the very watch he was issued during his former missions. During an event at Omega, he saw again his very watch.
For the first time
in years. He held it in his hands and he started literally like caressing it, like petting it. And he looked at me and his eyes turned into something glassy and shiny, and he shed tears. And he, looking at his watch, looking at me, he said, "Yes, it is my watch." It meant everything to him, all these memories, and he was crying, holding his old Apollo 17 watch. This is an emotional experience like no other.
So this is a very popular vintage model, obviously, and it's increasingly expensive to buy one, but there are reissues that are exactly the same. I wonder, why do you think this model is still relevant today? I mean, it's however many years later.
Simple enough, because it transcends, a Speedmaster transcends any design trends. A Speedmaster or a Moonwatch, today and back then, was the most connected watch you could ever wear. And I really mean it, a connected watch.
Okay.
Yes, we know what a connected watch is supposed to be today. It's a watch that reminds you of your everyday life.
Yes.
When you tend to forget it, because it beeps.
Yes.
Imagine being Captain Cernan, and he said this many times over, on the moon, looking at your own home planet the way you and I look at our moon. It's the farthest away place a human being can possibly be until today. He had family, he had kids, he had everything. His everyday life was removed from him. And he said so many times with tears in his eyes that looking at his Speedmaster on the lunar surface,
while he looks at the blue planet.
Looking at his Speedmaster, he received his constant reminder of what his family might be doing. This is the most connected watch ever, because during this distance, which is the farthest any man has traveled, it kept him connected with the things dearest in his life. You can't get more connected than with a Speedmaster.
I thought I was a long way from my daughters in Switzerland to Australia, but that takes it to another level.
You need a 10503.
I'm Jim Reagan. I worked for NASA for 36 and a half years. My first assignment was to come up with a watch that NASA could certify so the astronauts would have a watch they could use on the surface. The requirement was any piece of hardware that went on the vehicle had to be qualified. We had 4 brands that submitted the watches. One I ruled out because it wasn't a capable wrist-worn watch like we specified, so we actually tested 3. There was 10 different environments that we had to test. It had to pass all 10. If it failed one, it automatically failed the watch. Actually, 2 of the watches got eliminated in the first test, which was a thermal vacuum test. Omega was the only one that passed all the testing. Even I was surprised that I could get any watch through those kind of environments, because the environments were really made for pieces of hardware you mounted on the vehicle and that type of stuff. The most extreme test you could do to a piece of hardware. The watch was always a backup, but if you lost the capability of either talking to the ground or having the digital timers they had, or the digital timers when they went out on the lunar surface, the only thing they had to know how long they had been there was the Omega watch that they had on. And so I was highly critical of making sure that it was done right. I probably serviced the watches more than they ever need to be serviced. And where it paid dividends is Apollo 13. I gave the astronauts the Omega and the other 2 as well to test to see if it met their requirements. And in the end, not knowing what my testing was, they chose the Omega. We were really happy. It made it easy to get certified to fly on NASA. Omega has an extremely good name with NASA. They've been the single contractor that's supplied hardware since the Gemini days through the shuttle and the space station days, is still flying a qualified Omega watch.